Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian, and I am broadcasting to you live from beautiful Budapest, Hungary. All right, so today is September the 8th, and we are continuing with IELTS Writing Task 1 for the academic IELTS. Okay, it's different for general IELTS. For general IELTS, you usually have to write a letter. For academic IELTS, you have to analyze a graph, chart, table, or diagram, and then you have to write an essay for that. And as usual, our materials are coming from our websites. The presentation you will see today is adapted from the interactive course that you have online at aehelp.com. That's academicenglishhelp.com. And if you're studying for general IELTS, we have another website for you. It's gieltshelp.com. Both of these websites have lots and lots of great materials, practice exams, interactive quizzes for your phone, tablet, computer, as well as over 100 hours of video lessons to really help you improve your band score. Hi Krupta, hi Dotto, hi Faraz, hi Rajesh, hi Sami, hi Naveen. Good to see a member in here as well early on. All right, so make sure to visit our websites when you get a chance. Check that out. You can also download our app, look for our logo, search for Academic IELTS Help in your Google Play Store. Hi, everyone who's joining. All right, so a few of you submitted the homework from the last class, and I sent you back some emails. Good job to those of you who finished that task 2. Again, if you have questions, comments, or you're submitting your homework, don't hesitate. Write me an email. My email is adrian@aehelp.com. That's my name at aehelp.com, where we have writing, editing help, and you can book, practice IELTS speaking interviews with us. Our live broadcasts are according to Central European time, usually between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Today, again, course part 14, IELTS Writing Task 1. Tomorrow, we will do another class. It will be a members chat only, waiting for some recommendations there, members. If I don't get any, I'll come up with a class for you. And then Monday, Tuesday, we will not have any classes, and I will be back on Wednesday with course part 15. We'll be moving towards writing task 2. We have 5 days of classes, so lots and lots of good information for you to learn and practice for IELTS success. All right, so without further ado, let me just show you real quick the websites. If you're looking for general IELTS, check out our website. It has this green background. If you're looking for academic IELTS, then join this website with the blue background. Okay. So in the class on Thursday, we talked about the 6 different kinds of possible question or graph types that you can get for task 1 academic. Hi, Mohammed. Can you hear me okay? Is the sound is good for you, or is it my voice that's not clear, Mohammed? Let me know. If anybody else is having trouble with the sound, do let me know. All right, so writing task 1, again, it's a minimum of 150 words. You have 20 minutes to do it. Don't spend any more time than 20 minutes, even if you don't reach the 150 words, because task 2 needs 40 minutes, and task 2 is worth 2/3 of your mark, okay? So task 2 is twice as valuable for your band score for writing as task 1, so make sure you leave twice as much time. Okay, so again, the structure of task 1, to get a good score, have an overview. That should be about 2-3 sentences. It describes the graph or the chart that you're looking at and the main features of the data, okay? Don't forget that part. That's important. Then for part 2, you have to analyze the graph or the table. We'll look at some examples in a second. It's 8 to 10 sentences there. And then finally, you summarize the key information that can be learned from the table or the diagram or the graph. And that's 1 to 2 sentences there, okay? Yeah, I had a little bit. I have a little bit of a cold, Naveen, so my nose is a little bit stuffy today. You're right. I think maybe that's what Mohammed was hearing as well. Okay. Um, Mohammed Sarah, yes, there is a free version of the website as well. You can try some of the features for free, absolutely. So you can check that out. Okay. All right. In the analysis, you need to label the key points on the graph before you start writing. So we'll do that in a minute. Let's take a look at an example question. All right. So here you're looking at a couple of bar charts, and here is the question for them. So writing task 1. The following graphs show the annual rainfall in 2 North American cities. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. 20 minutes, 150 words. Okay, let's take a closer look at these graphs. So here we have the first graph. And you can see that this first graph is showing the average rainfall in Vancouver, BC in millimeters. Okay, MM stands for millimeters. And on the side here, anybody remember what this line is called and what this line is called? So this vertical line and this horizontal line. Anybody remember what the names of those are from our class 2 days ago? The x and the y-axis, that's right. And by the way, the plural for axis is axes, okay? So if you're writing it plural, instead of an I, it's an E, okay? So it's the axes, if you're saying it plural, and this is the y-axis, and this is the x-axis, okay? So it's good to know the plural form of that as well when you're using it in writing, all right? Right on. So on the y-axis, we have the amount of precipitation in millimeters going from 0 to 120. And on the x-axis, we have the months of the year. So we have January, February, March, April, May, and so on. Again, just a quick check from last class. Does anybody remember what type of data the y-axis is showing? And what type of data is the x-axis showing? So Avtar Kumar says, well, you have intervals of 20 on the y-axis, and that's also the type of data, right, Avtar? So that's interval data on the y-axis. And then on the x-axis, anybody get that? What kind of data that is? So Preeti says, well, that's nominal data because it's names. So think of nom as names. So this is nominal data. Absolutely, it's the names of the months. All right, so when we look at this graph, we've now identified some of those main features of what we see on the XY axis. And then what is the main feature of the data itself? So in this graph, what's the main feature when I look at this? And you should be looking for patterns here. So what is this pattern showing you? What's the main idea that you can draw from this pattern? Can anybody tell me that? So what pops out at you? What jumps out at you right away when you look at these bars and the shape of this graph? Amia, nice vocabulary. So Amia says it's a parabolic pattern. If you guys are looking at the chat, at Amia's comment there, she says it's a parabolic pattern. Parabolic means it's this shape here, okay? Now, in a little bit more detail, it means that from winter, there's a decrease of rainfall to summer, and then an increase as we go out of summer and back into winter. So that's an important main feature there for sure. And you might want to put that into your overview or in your summary. Okay, you'll have to decide that, but one of those two. So either in the overview or the summary, you might want to include that piece of information. I would probably put that into the overview. So yeah, there's an absolute decrease of rainfall as we go towards summer and an increase as we go back towards winter. Education Act, instead of saying an inverse dome, it's definitely better to say a parabolic shape, okay? So good, all right. Don't forget about the second graph, of course. Here we go. So this is the average rainfall in Washington, D.C. in millimeters. Again, we have the same information on the X and Y axes. Okay, so you have the exact same measures in this case. Now be careful, because in the IELTS, when you get your graph or your chart, the measures are not always the same. So you might have something different on the y-axis in this case. So you might have this only showing from 0 to 60. Okay, so really pay attention to those numbers. Don't ignore them. Okay, in this case, it's a little bit simpler. We have the same exact measure. Okay, and then what do we notice in this one? So what's the main feature that we can pick out? And Jeffrey, good to see you in class. You're absolutely right. It's fluctuating, okay? Zigzag pattern, Avtar Kumar, is okay, but the word fluctuating is better, all right? So for those of you that don't know, this is called fluctuation, and the verb is to fluctuate, so it's fluctuating. Okay, fluctuating basically means it moves up and down like this. If you draw a line at the top, you can see that wave pattern. So there's a fluctuation of precipitation throughout the year. All right, so that's definitely the main feature. So again, the main feature from the first graph is that parabolic shape, the decrease to summer and then increase to winter for Vancouver, and then for Washington, D.C., which is, of course, the capital of the U.S., we have fluctuating rainfall, okay? So those are the two main features. You definitely want to include those into your overview. Now, in the official IELTS, when you're sitting down and you're writing your response for task 1, before you begin writing, you should also label some of the key points that you're going to discuss in your essay. So you should realize that this bar is the highest. So December has the most rain in Vancouver, okay? And then November and January are somewhat similar, also very high amounts of rain in those 2 months. And then the lowest amount of rain experienced in Vancouver is in the month of July. So you definitely want to mark that point as well, and maybe include this decrease and increase in some sense. But 1 and then 2 and then 3, those would be key points. Label those when you're writing your response so that you have good organization. You can start with this, and then you can compare, and of course you can compare it to the other graph as well. When you have more than one graph, you need to make sure to make comparisons between the graphs, okay? That's very, very important to get a high band score. So we have point 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 for the decrease and the increase. Careful not to label too many points. You don't have time to write about all the little details. The question's asking you for the main features, so focus on those main features, okay? All right, so we take a look at the second graph. We can see that the highest month here is maybe May, or very close is the month of September, which is also 5. And then the lowest month looks like it's February, so point number 6 there. And it looks like April and maybe even November, but definitely April is close as the least amount of precipitation. So interesting, of course, is that even the difference between the most and the least is not a lot, okay? It's only about 20 millimeter difference in those 2 months. Okay, so you've got your 6 points there, and now you can discuss those in the analysis part of your essay. And then the conclusion, of course, you can, or the summary, I should say. It's not really a conclusion, because in the conclusion you give opinions. In task 1, you do not give opinions, okay? So you should not give your own opinion in task 1. It's a third-person essay. So for your summary, you can make comparisons between the two graphs and express that both cities experience a lot of rain, but the way that they experience this rain is different for each city. All right, so let's have a look at some of that writing. All right, so here is an example response to this essay. Okay, I'm trying to make the text big enough. Can everybody read that? Okay, I know the text is a little bit small because it's a fair bit of text there. If you can't read it, I can make it larger and move it around. Just give me some feedback here, ladies and gentlemen. Can you read this? Is it big enough to read on your phone or on your computer for you? Can you see it? All right, so Nguyen says yes. Marasa says no. All right, most people seem to be able to read it. Anyway, I'll read it for you so you'll know. So here's the overview. Okay, the overview in this case is 2 sentences. And I can move it around. Let me just make it a little bit bigger, and then we'll get right into it. Okay. So it starts off by saying there are 2 bar graphs indicating the average amounts of rainfall in 2 cities, Vancouver, BC, and Washington, D.C., as shown by the graph titles. Okay, so what I'm doing here with the very first sentence of the overview is telling the reader that I clearly see what I'm looking at, and it also lets the reader visualize what I'm analyzing or what I'm about to analyze. Harish, the overview is very important for task 1. And yes, you can think about it as the introductory paragraph. Now, I am paraphrasing the question here a little bit. I'm not using the same words as the question, so I'm using synonyms and other paraphrasing techniques. And very importantly, notice that I'm adding more details. So if you simply just repeat the question, you're not going to get points for that. But if you paraphrase the question and add in these details, so combine in the names of the cities, then you're moving towards the right direction. Okay, so make sure to add in the details. Notice here, I don't just say the graphs show, but instead I say there are 2 bar graphs indicating. So immediately I tell the reader that I realize I'm looking at 2 graphs, and I also realize I'm not just looking at any kind of graph, I'm looking specifically at bar graphs. So use that vocabulary, okay? And then here I say the y-axis depicts the amount of rainfall received, while the x-axis shows each month of the year from January through December. Okay, so here I'm describing the y and the x-axis. I know some teachers, sometimes students say, well, my teacher said I don't need to talk about the axis. It's a good idea. In my opinion, it's a very good idea to include that sentence for yourself so that you're focusing on the measurements that are being used. And it is good description for your reader because it makes it much more clear to understand your analysis after. Also, here I'm creating a complex sentence. I'm using the word while. Okay, it's a conjunction of time. And by creating this complex sentence, I'm showing a higher level of writing ability. And then also, again, I'm adding the details of January through to December. So I'm giving a very clear time frame for what I'm looking at, okay? Now here, I don't have any more information, but I could add one more sentence here. So if I'm writing the IELTS, and especially if I'm good at writing and I've practiced and I can write nice and quick, then I can add maybe one more sentence following the word December here. Does anybody know what that sentence could be? So what could I add here to make this overview even better, going from a band 8 to a band 9? Okay. Yeah, so Naveen's asking, do we need to mention the measurements, the unit measurements, so the intervals of 20 millimeters of rainfall? Yeah, it could be good, Naveen, absolutely. That's not going to hurt your marks, certainly. And also it will help you to think more clearly about the data, so it could be a good idea to include the interval units of measures, in this case, those 20 millimeters of rainfall. So what could I add here? Okay, think about that. That's an important question for you right now, is what sentence could I add here to make this an even better overview? I'll write it down. You start writing as well, and let's see if what you write matches with what I write. Okay, so the sentence that I would add in this part would be, at first glance, it is clear that the pattern of data shows a parabolic shape for Vancouver, as where it fluctuates for Washington, D.C. You probably don't need to write Washington, D.C. every time. You could say City of Washington. The reason, by the way, for Washington, D.C. is there is a state in the U.S. called Washington State, which is on the other side of the country. So not to confuse the city with the state, okay? Just a little side note there. But I could add this sentence, what we just discussed about the parabolic shape versus that fluctuating shape, or that zigzag pattern, as one of the students mentioned, okay? So that could be one more sentence that I choose to finish my overview, so that it really pushes that band from an 8 to 9, okay? Does that make sense? So that could be added to the overview for an even better response. All right, and then here you kind of see that sentence in the beginning of the analysis. Probably a better idea to put it in here with a little bit more detail, as I just showed you. But if you're writing like this, you're still going to get a very good score. So here, the analysis. It's about 6 to 8 sentences, I believe, in this case. Let's read through it, and let's see how this author highlights those points that I just showed you on those graphs, okay? So the very different shape of each graph is notable upon first analysis. All right. The Washington graph depicts almost constant rainfall throughout the year. However, the Vancouver graph shows very different values from one season to the next, okay? It's some really nice information, and it's taking that data and turning it into human language, okay? So again, the human language is constant rainfall throughout the year versus different values from one season to the next. So in this case, the writer could have chosen to include that piece of information in with the overview. It's synonymous with what I just wrote. All right, and then continuing on, while the highest value for a single month precipitation in each year is very similar, approximately 100 millimeters, okay? So what this is doing here, the author, again, using some nice complex language, while the highest value, right away I can see that it's a subordinating conjunction, starting with the dependent clause and then followed by the independent clause. And let's have a look here at what the what this author is comparing. So in this case, the author is comparing these highest values. So this one, this one, this one. So here you have December. December is over 100 millimeters of rainfall. And then here for Washington, D.C., in May, you have very close to 100 millimeters of rainfall. Don't get lost in details, so don't say it looks like it's 98 millimeters and this one looks like 102 millimeters, okay? That's details. That's not necessarily good writing. If you're doing this in university and it's very science related, then yes, you might need those very specific numbers. But in this case, you don't need that. You just need the approximately 100 millimeters of rainfall for the highest values, but you can see, of course, that it's different months. So here it's May and here it's December. So this author's saying, hey, it's two graphs. I'm comparing these two graphs to each other right away. So I'm comparing the highest from here to here, and then probably what they will do is compare the lowest after, okay? So let's go back to the example, and then we can continue on. Now that you've had a good look at those graphs, it should be fairly clear, okay? Let me make that a little bit bigger. So here, while the highest value for a single month's precipitation in each city is very similar, approximately 100 millimeter, Washington's lowest value is about 4 times higher than that of Vancouver's. Okay, so a beautifully written sentence. It's comparing the highest values in both cities with the lowest value. So the lowest value for Vancouver, maybe you remember now, was in July. And the lowest value for Washington, I can't remember which month, but it was still quite high. Okay, so the lowest for Vancouver, according to this author, is about 4 times less than that of Washington, D.C. Okay, so here, notice this hyphen, okay? This hyphen tells the reader that there's more definition coming, okay? So there's 2 ways you can do it. You can do it with a hyphen, or you can do it with a comma as well. That's called an additive clause, okay? So when you have that hyphen, or if you have a comma here, don't use both. Then that means you're giving me an additive clause or a definitive clause, which is explaining what that number actually is. So here the author says the lowest amount of rainfall for Washington is about 65 millimeters in February compared to 15 millimeters for Vancouver in July, period, okay? So that told me there that this is the detailed description for this. And this author used the hyphen, which is a great little tool, okay? It's a good punctuation tool. It's good to know how to use that for your writing. When you're doing scientific writing, it's good to use the hyphen. If you're doing writing for task 2, I suggest using the comma, okay? So when you're not doing scientific writing as much, or you're not giving numbers, then use the comma instead of the hyphen. I'll get you back on screen here. Don't worry. Just give me 1 second. The camera tends to go to sleep after 30 minutes for some unknown reason. All right, so then let's continue on. These graphs demonstrate, okay, so we're continuing from here. These graphs demonstrate that Vancouver experiences. Notice the word demonstrate here. So in task 1, you use the word show, illustrate, depict, demonstrate a lot. So it's a really good idea to know some good vocabulary and some nice synonyms to express that concept of showing. So these graphs demonstrate that Vancouver experiences a distinct wet season, which runs roughly from October to March, okay? So what this student is basically saying is that, hey, when I'm looking at this graph, I'm realizing that if I break the year into, or the months into seasons, summer, fall, winter, spring, then here we can see that going from fall, October, November, December, through winter, January, February, and then even the beginning of spring, March, that is a wet season for this city, because these 3 graphs and these 3 bars and these 3 bars here are obviously a lot more precipitation than these months here. So this is a wet season. This is more of a dry season. Clearly for Washington, it's just all wet. Okay, it's all rainy. All right. So, absolutely, Sainul Abid saying in the second graph, it is difficult to distinguish the amount of, or it's difficult to distinguish a clear wet season because there isn't one, okay? Careful, Sainul, with that wording because it's not quite accurate information, all right? Okay, so let's move on here. Just a second. All right. So, which runs from October to March, and a dry season, which runs from April to September. Okay. Notice the use of adjective clause words like which runs roughly from October to March. Okay. So some very good description there. Continuing on from here. So Washington, comma, on the other hand, comma. The reason why is because this is read as Washington, on the other hand, experiences similar levels of rainfall throughout the year, okay? So there's no distinction between seasons for the rainfall, so similar amounts of rainfall throughout the year, comma, between 65 and 95 millimeters. So notice that here, this author, this student, is using a comma here and a comma here to add this piece of information, which describes this piece of information, okay? So between 65 and 95 millimeters describes the similar amounts of rainfall throughout the year, all right? Hopefully that makes sense, okay? Indicating that it does not experience seasons. So kind of close to what one of our students suggested there. All right. When it comes to precipitation. Also notable is that it appears Washington experiences more rainfall annually than Vancouver, about 900 millimeters compared with Vancouver, 500 millimeters. So here we're reading the work of an exceptionally good student who did a little bit of math, okay? And again, don't forget that doing a little bit of math can really help you to come up with some brilliant points for those graphs, tables, charts, and write a sentence like this, which will again definitely push your band score higher. So what the student basically did here is they summed these bars. So they basically said, okay, I can see that this bar is 80. I can see that these bars are 90, 102. And so they did a little bit of quick math looking at these bars, and they said that's roughly 500 millimeters all together. And then they looked at this one and they said, well, wait, look, this is roughly 80, maybe 90 on average, so it's 900. I think the math is maybe a little bit off. I would probably say that this is closer to 700, 800. This is probably around 400, 300, 400, but that's okay. Even if your math is not perfect, as in this case, it's a beautiful comparison and you will get points, okay? The IELTS examiner is not going to look at this and add it together and say, oh, wait a second, you were off by 100 millimeters here and you were off by 150. They're not going to do that. They're going to realize that, okay, I see what you're doing. You're adding these together, and you're making a comparison of the total rainfall in the year, okay? So, some nice comparison contrast there. That's what you're doing. And finishes that sentence. And then, of course, we have the summary in the bottom, at the bottom here. Now, sometimes students ask me, if I write a good overview, do I have to write a summary? Anybody know the answer to that question? So many students ask this question from me. If I have a good overview, do I need a summary? My teacher says I don't need a summary. So what do you think? Do you need a summary or not? Is it a good idea to include one or no? Or do you have to include one or not? So Marasa says, I don't think you have to. Sami says, yeah, I think you should. Mayfis says, no, you don't need to. Some of you say yes. Okay, here's the answer. If you have a really good overview and you skip the summary, you can still get a good band score. Okay, so you can still get a really nice band score, especially if you reach that 150 word minimum. If you've run out of time, this is what you need to remember. If you've run out of time, so you're at 20 minutes or at 19 minutes, don't start writing a summary. Okay, so if you've reached your 19, 20-minute mark, don't write a summary. If you have a solid overview, a solid analysis, then just go to task 2, okay? Make sure you save that 40 minutes. However, if you've been writing for, let's say, 15, 16, 17 minutes, and you still have a couple minutes to go, and you know you have a couple good sentences in your mind, absolutely include that summary. Okay, so if you have 2, 3, 4 minutes remaining from the 20, definitely include the summary because it does make it better. Okay, it makes it better. Now, summary is for task 1, and I saw one student there say, oh, we can do a summary for task 2. For task 2, you're not writing a summary, okay? You're writing a conclusion. Conclusion and summary is not exactly the same. It's really important to remember that. A summary is more applicable to an expository essay where you're writing in third person and you're explaining what you see and you're analyzing in what you see. A conclusion is better for a persuasive essay, an argument type essay like task 2, where you're giving an opinion, okay? So I'm going to make a quick note for everyone because I see that there's often confusion between these two terms. So using in summary, okay, is for task 1 expository essay. Okay, and it doesn't give opinions, so no opinion, just a summary of the main points. Okay, so absolutely no opinion. Use in conclusion for task 2. Don't write in summary. I've seen students do that where they write in summary for task 2. It's not terrible, but it's definitely not as good as saying in conclusion, okay? By the way, little side note, in university, many professors don't like to see these words at the end of the essay because it's understood, okay? So when you're in university, don't write in conclusion, don't write in summary, just simply write your conclusion. Oftentimes, professors will circle these two words and say, please don't waste my time reading this. I know it's a conclusion. It's the last paragraph, okay? So you don't need to write it. You just write your conclusion, all right? So conclusion, in conclusion is for task 2. It's for persuasive essays. And you do give an opinion, strengthens the opinion. And a valuable conclusion should always have a take-home message. I know some students that have been following these classes know what I mean. We won't get into that today, but we'll get there when we cover task 2. So keep that in mind, all right? Let's have a look at this summary. So here, the summary is, in summary, the chief difference between the graphs are the distinct rainfall seasons in Vancouver, which contrast with the relatively constant levels in Washington, as well as the fact Washington experiences significantly more rainfall per year overall. So you can see that the information in this summary is already mentioned in detail in the essay. Here, it's just paraphrased and condensed or summarized, okay? So that's what it is. And that works really well. Aditya says, can we use finally at the end? No, Aditya, I've seen other students use that as well, the finally at the end. It's a little bit awkward English, and it's also more like grade 9, grade 10 English than college or university, okay? Finally is not the best to use in this type of an essay. Why? Why is it not good in this particular essay to use finally? Can anybody tell me that? It's a good question. So for these two bar graphs, why would using finally not be a really good approach? Why does it not work well with this question or this essay? Can anybody tell me that? And I'll make a note on that as well. Okay, so using first, second, third, finally is best applied to process essay writing, like a flowchart or a diagram that describes a process. Okay? So that's the answer. Hopefully some of you realize that, all right? So when you have a process type essay, and I showed you those kinds of essays a couple days ago, then you can write first, second, third, and finally. In this example that we just looked at, there is no finally. It's just awkward to say finally because there is no beginning and end. If you write your essay like first in the month of January, second in the month of March, next in the month of July, then you're kind of turning it into a process essay, but it will definitely be a weaker essay than the one that we just read, okay? So All Summer says, because there is no sequence, and you're absolutely right. Sainul says the same thing. Preeti, I'm not sure if in the graph describes this idea, but Sainul, Abid, All Summer definitely has the right answer there. There's no process here, okay? So don't use terms that describe a process when you're not really looking at a process, all right? Okay, so this slide just reminds you of our editing services that, again, on our websites, we provide you with these kinds of corrections and services. So if one of you would have written finally or first, we would probably correct that and comment, please use this for process essays. This is not a process essay, okay? So that's an example of a bar graph. Now here we have a pie chart, okay? So let's do this one together a little bit faster so we can include this whole essay in this class. Let's read the question. So the question says, okay, I'm going to move at a good solid pace here, just so you get the idea of how smoothly you can do this once you have the right idea for each one of these graphs, okay? So here, writing task 1 question is, the pie charts show the types of media used from 1990 to 2010. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So that last part of the question is pretty much always the same. And here we're looking at pie charts. So pie charts are comparing different kinds of nominal data as percentages or portions of that 100%, okay? So here we have 1990, you have cassettes, compact disc, vinyl record. So here are the portions. And then here we have 2000, which is 10 years after, or a decade later. Decade means 10 years. Make note of that vocabulary. And here you have compact disc and digital audio. Now, of course, right away, I can see that there is a big change in the types of media used for listening to music, okay? Here, there's a huge blue piece, which is all the compact disc, and a small little red piece, which is digital audio. And then here, you have these kind of equal-sized portions and this bigger blue piece of compact disc. All right, now here, the third one, 2010, again, a decade later. You have a much bigger red slice now of digital audio or MP3. Blue has become smaller, it's compact disc, and whoa, what's this? A little bit of green slice there, vinyl records, maybe DJs in 2010, bringing back vinyl records that disappeared and then reappeared. What's the main feature here? So what do I notice? Okay, so I notice these are pie charts. I note the different kinds of music media. I note the 3 different years. I note that they're decade apart. And what do I clearly see just by glancing? So first glance at these 3 pie charts. Well, I can see that in the 30 years depicted here in the 3 different time periods, there is a great change in the type of media used by people to listen to music. That's all that I need to notice. So I don't have to go into a lot of details. This is for my overview. I just have to realize that this is very different from this is very different from this, and they're all very different from each other. Okay? So that is clearly observable right away for that overview. Okay? And then I mark my points of analysis for the body. So I mark that half of the people here used CDs. Almost all people used CDs here. Cassettes and vinyl records disappeared. MP3 appeared. Here, MP3 became very popular. Compact disc decreased, and vinyl record reappeared. So those are my points that I recognize. Again, if you're using our course, you probably just saw that red button flash. You can click on that and right away start typing and sending to our editors. Okay. So here is the overview, and my good buddy here, Jim, is asking, does your overview look similar to this? These 3 pie charts depict the percentages of each type of music media used in 1990, 2000, and 2010. One of the really common mistakes I see students making right away with this first sentence is they'll write something like, used from 1990 to 2010. Okay, so a lot of students write the sentence. I've seen it because I've seen our students send this information. Say each type of music media used from 1990 to 2010. This is incorrect. Why is it incorrect to use from to? Okay. Can anybody tell me why that's incorrect? Stating that it shows music media used from 1990 to 2010. So Jeffrey says, well, the consumer's preferences of music changed. Ashok says, well, there's gaps. These pie charts are only showing us 1990, 2000, 2010. We can't see the other years, right? Exactly. Begzod says there's no continuity here. It's not a line graph. That's right, okay? So Dunuin, same thing. You're saying, hey, it's just 3 years that we're looking at here. We're not looking at the whole 30 years. There could be some very different data in 1995 or 2002. And you're absolutely right, okay? This is for a line graph. This is for a pie chart, okay? There are 4 different types of media represented in the legend: cassette, compact disc, vinyl record, digital audio. And it's legends because there's multiple. The word legend refers on a map or on a diagram to this here. Okay, so this orange is cassette, this blue is compact disc, this vinyl record is green. This is a legend. On a map, it shows you the road, the highway, the train tracks, rivers. That's your legend, okay? Know that vocabulary, legend. All right, girls and guys, so there is the question. That's a lot of information, I think, for everyone for today to chew over, remember, and practice. So I challenge you in this case to finish writing this task 1 essay with these 3 pie charts. You can look at this video again on the channel after it's done uploading in about an hour. So you can look at this question one more time and write the full essay. So write the overview, the analysis, and the Summary, send it to my email, and I will give you a score estimate, okay? I don't have time to edit and correct it, unless, of course, you use our editing services, in which case you pay for that time. But I will give you a score estimate for free. So I'll let you know what kind of a band score you would get for your response, okay? So again, email that homework to Adrian at aehelp.com. Again, that's my name at aehelp.com, and I'll give you a free score estimate of how you would do on the IELTS approximately. And those estimates are pretty accurate. Most of our students say they're either exactly what they get on the IELTS or just a 0.5 band difference. So they're quite accurate. To get all of these materials, to go through these slides on your own in your own pace in a much more beautiful format on your phone or your tablet. For academic IELTS, check us out at aehelp.com. For general IELTS, check us out at gieltshelp.com. Harish, you can get a membership on the websites by just going to the websites, clicking the Join Now button. And on our channel, you can become a member by clicking the Join button beside the Subscribe button if you see it. If you don't, it's probably not available in your country, or you might need to use a different device, okay? All right. Amia, if you sent me an email, I will definitely have a look at it sooner probably than later and send you a reply. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I hope you gained some valuable information there. Again, remember, practice does make perfect, okay? So practice, practice, practice. And with task 1, if you're going to university, you're going to need to be able to write like this anyway. So make sure you learn it well preparing for the IELTS. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye for now. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have restful sleep. Wake up with energy tomorrow. Tackle the day. And I will see you tomorrow for that members chat class. Bye for now, everybody. Take care.